Hello everyone and welcome to Ash's Whiskey Wars. Christmas decorations. Christmas has been and gone, but just before we get rid of the decorations, I wanted to record a neck pour of a Highland Scotch whiskey for you guys. And that's going to be the Deanston 12-year-old. This whiskey is bottled at 46.3% ABV, just like the 10-year-old that I have and love. And it's also non-chill filtered. Nothing about the colour, unfortunately. Maybe I should have done a Google search before I drink the liquid so that I know for you guys. It doesn't say on the tin, and I don't like to look up whiskies when I do a neck pour, as you guys know. Now, what I do know is this is purely ex-bourbon cask, which is something that I really wanted to explore from Deanston because, like I mentioned, like I mentioned earlier, I had the 10-year-old and I loved it, but that's Bordeaux red wine cask finished. So a great Christmassy whiskey, but I wanted to try a little bit more about what Deanston is about, and this is their house spirit, really. Let's get it out. I'm excited. I really am. I found this for a brilliant price that I just couldn't say no to, which we'll get onto later in the video. So that's the reason for the purchase. And I did want to see how this one would compare to the 10-year. Same proof at 46.3%, but this one is 2 years older, so maybe better, but the big difference is going to be ex-bourbon cask versus Bordeaux red wine cask, because the Bordeaux casking for the 10-year-old does impart a lot of flavour. And age does not always mean better. Alright, let's get this cracked open. Cork pop time. Probably the best cork pop of the year, if I'm being honest. That was brilliant. Let's get this one poured out. I can smell it straight out of the glass, out of the bottle, I should say. Bit of a healthy pour there. If I'm being totally honest, it seems like it would be natural colour, because if I was adding colouring into the whiskey, I would definitely add more into it. It's a very, very pale straw colour. Very pale. It looks like a heavily watered down whiskey. So I'm thinking the colouring must be natural. But again, I don't know. Honestly, so over Christmas I actually treated myself to a couple of different sherries because I wanted to improve my knowledge on the different sherries to help with my whiskey profiling and note taking. So I wanted to understand sherry more because I love port, so I feel I know port really well. Sherry I've never really had, and I picked up a PX sherry, but that's not what I'm reminded of with this one. It was the Fino sherry, and I was so surprised because I always thought sherries are really sweet, and that Fino sherry, it had a seafood and almost saltwater smell with some sweetness, and it threw me off. And I can't say that I was really into that, but I was just reminded of it when I went into the nose there, which I wasn't expecting at all. It's sweet, but it reminds me of that Fino sherry. A little bit more subtle, I should say, but it has that almost seafoody smell without the fishiness. So that little bit of salt and quite watery, which I wasn't expecting at all, with a little bit of oakiness, but not too much. I get some lemon in there on the nose. It's really feeling fresh, and I genuinely was not expecting that going in. I was expecting going in, to be honest, that it would be quite rich honey, cereally, malty, maybe some like oats, porridge oats, that's creamy vanilla, That's where I was thinking. And at the moment, that's not what I'm getting. I do get honey, but it's quite a watery and, dare I say, a little bit of salt in the whiskey. With the oak, more so than the honey. But the honey is that sweetness. It has actually more lemon than the honey though. Now I'm getting that slightly cooked malt nose. Getting malt through now. A little bit of cocoa. This one's changing a little bit now. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of cinnamon and cocoa on the back end of the nose. Dusted nuts. I'm getting a dustiness, as you can tell. Cocoa, cinnamon, dusted nuts. It's that dusty nature. Okay, I just want to get into the taste now. Just before we do, if you'd be so kind as to click the like button, the share button, but most importantly that subscribe button, that would be much, much appreciated. Thank you. Nuts. Nuts and oak. Oaky nuttiness. I'm excited. Okay, I'm going in. Can't wait any longer. Taste initially was very different to what I was getting on the nose. Couple of different notes here that take it a different direction. So it's not linear. The nose doesn't equal the taste from that first sip. I think I get a little bit less salt and a little bit more honey, which will appeal, I think, to more people. But there was almost like a tinned peach note on the taste. I'll go back in again, but I got this quite syrupy sweetness, more so than the nose. A little bit strange, really. You have, I think, two different types of flavour profile trying to either break out or mesh together. That syrupy tinned peach note, but then on the other hand you have that honeyed vanilla essence, nuttiness, touch of salt, and it's like blending. So that I think that tinned peach note, the syrupy peach, kind of threw me off a little bit. I'm unsure if I got a little bit of licorice on the finish on this whiskey. I'll have to go back in to taste it. But what I will say is this whiskey is not thick and creamy. I don't get an oiliness on this whiskey. It does come across watery, actually. But a lot of different notes. And I think, as you can see when I was nosing it and now tasting it, there are little changes here and there when you go back in. And so I think for a 12-year-old, I'm impressed with the complexity that the whiskey has. But personally, I would like it to be a little bit more creamy and thicker feeling than maybe a bit more oily, that sort of thing. Than it feels a little bit watery, which I would say is a little bit of a downside. That being said, in the summer, I do prefer a more watery whiskey. And when I say watery, it's just a texture standpoint and a refreshing standpoint. More watery whiskies tend to fit that for me. So I think maybe a little bit more of a spring summer whiskey than a winter whiskey where we are right now. Am I getting a little bit of marzipan on the whiskey now? I'm unsure. A little bit like that licorice note. There's something in this whiskey that I'm only just getting on the last two sips that's making me think perhaps a little bit of marzipan or a very, very weak licorice, which there isn't really, but it just gives me that hint of something where I go, licorice, marzipan, what am I picking up here? And I think on the second note I got a little bit more towards the marzipan, so perhaps that's what it's getting to, but it's not a strong note. But there's something on the taste. I think this is the sort of whiskey where my Whiskey War, or my in-depth review, which is something that I'm going to be starting in 2025, I will be doing in-depth reviews. And I think the review might be a little bit different. Just as you get more time to acclimatise to the whiskey, that does happen actually. With a NeckPour, I feel like, from my experience now, having done it for 12 months, you're much more likely to be very accurate on a whiskey that isn't as complex. The really complex ones can just change over the next couple of weeks. But again, there is this that the nose, I really want to dig into that dusty nature, because I get something that reminds me of cocoa, but it's not strong. Something that reminds me of like dusted nuts, and then also cinnamon spice. There is a spice to the whiskey, but it's nothing overbearing at all. It's just nice. It really does remind me of baking. And actually on the nose now, that's overpowering the honey. What baking could I think of? Okay, so since I'm pretty much at the end of the NeckPour, I just thought I'd look. I just realised there's notes on the back, so I thought I'd look at it. And they actually mention on the nose hints of gingerbread. Now, I thought there was a baking spice and a baking element to the whiskey. Now that it said gingerbread, you can possibly get it, but I don't want to say that note because I'm reading it and going, yeah, you can say that. I think I'll stick to what I was saying earlier, which is this cinnamon spiced, nutty, almost a little bit of cocoa on there, with the honey, but it does have a bit more of a baking feel to the whiskey. A little bit sweeter now on that finish. That tinned peach is coming through. Definitely tinned peaches on it. It doesn't mention it, but if you've had this whiskey, please tell me if you also get that tinned peach note, because I do. Now do let me know, guys. Would you like to see this in a Whiskey War with the Deanston 10? Which, okay, there's 2 years difference and they're both Deanstons at the same proof. But they taste very different. Or, I recently picked up the Arnock 12-year-old, which is another 12-year-old Highland Scotch. There is a proof difference between the two, but that one is quite well liked and received by the community. I think in the taste profile it's more similar to the Arnock, but I will be doing at least one of those videos, maybe both of those videos, to be honest with you. And I'm really interested. I think I know my order already, but I'm really excited to see how this one changes over time, as always. Okay guys, that's going to do it for today's episode of the NeckPour. If you did enjoy the video, please leave a like rating down below, please share the video, and please do click that subscribe button. And I hope to see you all for the next Whiskey War.